Hi, my name is Jeff H. Sipe, and I have over 10 years of recruiting experience, including 5 years at corporate headquarters at Google in Sunnyvale and in Mountain View. In this video, we are going to focus on the generic recommendations provided by Google's career website. There is so much good information out there. Go to the source, Google themselves. In this video, I'm going to break down the information in 4 specific sections. So it's types of questions, Google's 4 interview focus areas, generic advice from Google, and then Google's preparation advice as well. If you are currently interviewing at Google or Google is your dream job, what I cover in this video is specifically what they're looking for, and I'm just expanding on these concepts utilizing not only my generic experience, but my 5 years of working there. If you like my content, please like. If you have any comments, please comment below. And if you like my overall content, please subscribe. Let's dive in. Item 1, types of questions. So Google highlights open-ended questions, and this will include hypothetical and case study questions. The career site says you will not only be asked these types of questions, but to ask clarifying questions and devise requirements. Okay, clarifying questions, devising requirements. Okay, let's make a couple of additions to these steps. So step 1, you absolutely have to restate the question. Then step 2 is your clarifying questions and follow-up questions. You can't really get to step 2 without doing step 1. Part of your clarifying questions will really be dissecting the interview questions and breaking it down into more manageable pieces. And remember, these questions show thought process, so look at it from all angles. So that could be historical, that could be technical versus business, that could be internal versus external, scope and scale, resources, etc. So step 3, devise requirements. This is a really fun way to word it, actually. And what does this mean? Devise literally means to plan or invent a complex procedure, system, or mechanism by careful thought. Careful thought means Google wants you to take your time. Really, really take your time. And then secondly, you shouldn't be inventing anything the day of. You should go in with a plan, with a framework for commonly asked questions for your position. So for example, as a recruiter, I would definitely get an interview question around a hiring manager. And that could be an angry hiring manager, a non-responsive hiring manager, a hiring manager that changes their mind all the time about the job requirements. So yes, if I create that plan and framework, it's going to change slightly for those types of questions, but not drastically. I will still follow that plan. And that's a good segue into step 4. I'm going to present that plan at a very high level. It's an overview. So think 15 seconds. So I'm going to start by restating the question, then give that overview, and then ask the interviewer, would you like me to focus on any of those 5 or 10 steps? Or is there something specific that's calling out to you that you want me to focus on? Either way, you really want to keep in mind to make it specific to answering that specific question. Step 5, revisit step 2, and really you should be asking clarifying questions throughout, but when you get to the end of your answer, you really just want to be covering, hey, can I drill deeper on this item or that item or anything more generically you want me to cover, and it just covers your tracks a little bit. So behavioral questions, Starlf method, absolutely, this is going to be the best way to keep you organized. So that's situation, task, action, result, learnings, and follow-up questions. And so spend less time on the situation and task, focus on the actions, specifically you and your team. Results, you have to define the results: money, time, process improvements, kudos, like whatever came your way. And then learnings, because companies are looking for continual learners, and then they're also looking for continual learners that apply those learnings. And then lastly, with the follow-up questions, as I mentioned in open-ended questions, one, this allows you to be a little bit more brief because you're going to know, hey, I didn't focus enough or talk a lot about scope and scale because I had a follow-up question or resources, etc. And then it's also kind of probing any of the areas that pique their interest and you want to go more in depth. Secondly, and I mentioned this before, it's just to cover any missing items. If you missed anything, this will help you out. Two major things I just want you to keep in mind with the behavioral interview questions. Always cover all 6 items of the STARLF method. That will really set you up for success. And then secondly, you don't have to go in that order. Sometimes starting with a great result brings your interviewer in and captures their attention and really keeps them engaged throughout the question. Okay, item 2, Google's 4 famous interview focus areas, which are GCA, leadership, RRK, and googliness. And so GCA, that's short for general cognitive ability, and Google highlights this in 3 specific areas. It's your approach and ultimately how you solve complex problems, thought process, and how you use data. And let's kind of just define cognitive, right? This is conscious intellectual activity such as thinking, reasoning, remembering, memory, judgment, knowing, perceiving. It's a lot. So GCA definitely shows up in the form of open-ended questions and how you solve complex problems. And remember, the actual question itself might be simple, but what Google is looking for is for you to drill down into the layers of complexity within that simplistic question. To have success in a GCA interview, I recommend these 5 items. 1, slow down, take your time, let your brain process, and then ask your questions, clarifying thought process, but just slow down a little bit. Step 2, have a plan. I just want you to be thinking about the top 5 or 10 most common scenarios in your job and having the steps you would take in those common scenarios, as we discussed earlier. 3, talk out loud. Thought process. Just speak. Don't hold it in. Say it out loud. 4, ask questions. Oh boy, this is going to be a theme throughout. And then step 5, present info backed with solid data. And one more item that I have to mention is the most common piece of feedback I see on Glassdoor from those who identified as not getting a job offer from Google said they didn't ask any hard questions. So the reality is that they didn't see a simplistic question as complex and really drill into it. The second item is leadership. Google highlights leadership in 3 critical items: communication, decision-making skills, and hands-on leadership or stepping into a team, program, or project when needed. What is important to remember here is that the vast majority of candidates interviewing at Google are interviewing for individual contributor roles, but this leadership piece, it will show up in every single interview. So let's go through the specific items they mentioned. Number 1, communication. Think about this in 2 aspects. How do you share the details of how you communicated with others in your behavioral and open-ended questions? And then secondly, how do you communicate with them during the interview? And my one biggest piece of advice is really building in connectivity. So put on your meeting hat, not your interview hat. So how would you act in a meeting on the job? That's going to translate way better in the interview. Number 2, decision-making skills. Not very different from communication, right? But the big item here is talking out loud. You really just need to demonstrate thought process when you make decisions, why you're making decisions, and the recognition that, hey, all these decisions aren't perfect, right? Number 3, stepping up to lead. Specifically, when you took the lead of something for the betterment of the team, the organization, etc. These examples will carry tremendous weight. Why did you do it, and what did you learn by doing it? RRK, which is short for role-related knowledge. Google highlights 2 critical items in reference to RRK. Its strengths plus experience drive impact, and contribution for today and the future. Strengths plus experience drive impact. The good news is that this section should be one of the easier sections. Just make sure your behavioral answers demonstrate how you're a fit for the specific position you're interviewing for and how those answers show how you've had impact in the past. For open-ended questions, the STROM framework and plan. For both, think massive impact. So that's money saved, time saved, sweeping product changes, process changes, etc. The second item is contribution for today and in the future. A big item to note is that Google is interviewing you for the long term. And so, do they think or do they know you could do this job, but do future jobs based on how you demonstrate your knowledge for this role? So, why does this show up under role related knowledge? Because your answers are going to be so impactful that there's no way they can't see you having success in any position. The fourth item, Googliness. Google highlights 4 critical items pertaining to Googliness: how you work as an individual and in a team setting, how you help others, how you navigate ambiguity, and how you continue to learn and grow. Nobody seems to know exactly what this word means, but Laszlo Bock, one of the really revolutionary HR people at Google, probably defines it the best. And he says it's a combination of fun, intellectual, humility, conscientiousness, and a track record of having done interesting things, among other attributes. The only other 2 items I would say that I would add to this would be, I would just say overall high levels of emotional intelligence, and then good energy. People feel good energy, and if you give off good energy, it's going to be really impactful. So how do you work as an individual and in a team setting? This really shows up in the actions, results, and learnings of your behavioral questions. Focus on the strong impact of not only yourself and others, and that will really show up as success. How you help others. If you are specifically asked this question, this one question should take the whole interview. Then this is really coupled with leadership. How have you stepped up to really have an impact? And helping others doesn't even mean directly. It can totally mean indirectly too. So just think about all those times where you contributed maybe just that little bit more, you took a few extra minutes with somebody. That's really going to show up. And again, those are strong leadership skills as well. How do you navigate ambiguity? This goes back to open-ended questions. Solving all the information and not having all the pieces to the puzzle is critical at Google. So the best way to have success is to embrace this unknown, and embracing the unknown has a lot to do with thought process and clarifying questions. Lastly, how you continue to learn and grow. So this is going to show up in 2 ways. When you answer the behavioral interview questions, you absolutely have to have that learning, and now you get why it's so important. And then secondly, literally growth during the interview. Your ability to really push yourself on those open-ended questions and leave no stone unturned. Your goal is to grow during the day. Like, how can you continue to grow within each interview, get better within each interview? It will really show up and show them that you are going to be a great employee. Okay, item 3, these were some of the more generic concepts that came up on the Google Careers page, and there were 4 generic items. So number 1, be prepared to talk through your solutions in depth. This really starts with the question. Did you restate the question and make sure the solutions are actually answering the question? Secondly, obviously, did you ask clarifying questions? We keep talking about this. These questions really demonstrate your ability to solve, so ask a lot of them. Did you explore multiple paths? Especially with open-ended questions, identify the overview, give your interviewer those 10 items, and let your interviewer pick which one they want to answer, because then that's going to give you more in-depth solutions in a focused space. And then, did you just talk out loud during your question? Did you engage with your interviewer throughout and at the end with more follow-up questions? Remember, these questions may appear simple, but they don't want a simple answer. Number 2, push your own boundaries and find the best answer. This is one of my favorite concepts. Push yourself to give them more than what you felt was possible, and it's amazing. And the most important item with this concept, in my opinion, is you can't push the boundary without asking questions, thinking out loud, and taking time to answer the question. Number 3, throughout the interview process, feel free to ask your interviewers for clarification to make sure you fully understand the questions. Do you see the theme? If you're not asking a ton of questions, you're not having a successful Google interview. This is truly about connecting with your interviewer. Oftentimes, they will connect with your questions and get a better understanding of how you think. Sometimes your questions will pique their interest enough to say, yes, Let's go on that narrowed focus, and that narrowed focus increases your chances for success. One critical item pertaining to answering questions is deeper diving into the words that are being asked in the question. So, for example, if you get the question, how do you measure success? Well, what are we measuring? Are we measuring customer satisfaction, user experience, employee engagement? How are we defining success? Money, time, improved process, etc. Just these basic questions will demonstrate that you don't take anything at face value. And by the way, again, they might pique their interest to say, oh, let's talk about improved process. Number 4, interview us to ask questions about the work, about the team, about the culture. This one's simple. Have a list of great questions before you go into the interview. Have them written down and have them be different for the hiring manager, team member, collaborative partner, etc. You have to ask questions. It's a stopping point. If you don't ask your interviewers questions, you don't have any, you won't get the job. Okay, so item 4, how to prepare. Google presents 8 ideas here, and so I'm going to chop down what they actually said, and we're just going to go in and solve on the preparation piece. So number 1, predict the future. Google believes that you can predict most of the questions that will be asked of you. So I think the best way to predict the future is the job description. Of course, you can Google commonly asked questions for your role, and those are great to practice, but you really can predict the future, and the best way is with the job description. I'll pin the video I did on that where I do a screen share and show you how to go through the job description. Number 2, plan. And so as we talked about this in the beginning, I think it's really great to have your behavioral written down with the Starlf method and have that plan or framework for your open-ended questions. And by the way, commonly asked questions will fall in one of these 2 buckets. Like, tell me about yourself is an open-ended question, whereas tell me about a conflict you had, right, is a behavioral question. The only questions that don't really fit either category are estimation questions, and I'll also pin that video up if you want to review that. Number 3, have a backup plan. And so I think what Google really means by this is look for connectivity, look for engagement, and if your examples aren't really jiving or connecting with your interviewers, try something else. It doesn't mean that one answer won't connect with another, but just make sure you're using dynamic examples and that they're showing body language, that they're having good connectivity. And remember, sometimes you're going to have lots of different examples. And so let's go back to that conflict theme. Like, you might need to have an example for a conflict you had with a boss, a team member, a stakeholder, an internal partner, an external partner, or vendor. And you definitely want to create that framework for how you deal with conflict, and then, of course, adjust and adapt accordingly. Now, lastly, just want to mention this, conflict is a negative word, so if I ever got the conflict question, I would say an opportunity to build a better relationship with my boss is, right? And so you've changed negative words into positive words. Number 4, explain. So I really believe that this is 5 simple items. Just ask a ton of questions, think out loud, make assumptions, check assumptions, and then ultimately explain the why. Number 5, be data-driven. All you need to know is that Google is a data-driven company, so back up what you're saying with data. Don't say by implementing a new technology we save the company time and money. Say by implementing Salesforce as our new CRM, we were able to save $2 million over a 2-year period and reduce employee administrative work by 20%, giving every employee 1 day back a week for more strategic initiatives. Oftentimes, data will be in the little details, so just make sure in your behavioral answers especially, you're just attaching those little small details that take an extra second or 2, but give more connectivity to your interviewer. Number 6, clarify. Clarification will get you everywhere in a Google interview. It might be a basic item, but it's definitely top of mind for your interviewer. So drill down. This is what success looks like. Number 7, improve. I really like this one, and I want you to focus on state of mind. Get your mind thinking that with each question you get better, not more tired, not more worn down, because as you go through the day, the more concepts they introduce and the more insight they give you into the role, you actually can get better. Number 8, practice. We don't practice enough. If you're going to go try out for the basketball team, you're going to shoot 100 free throws every day for a month or for a week, but we don't practice for interviews. So number 1, just practice with a human being. The second best is to film yourself and practice in that way. And then third, just say it out loud. This is a ton of information. If you feel exhausted and overwhelmed, I get it. But these are the real basics that Google's looking for, and they're looking for them because they told you they're looking for them, right? And so these items could be applied to any interview. It doesn't just have to be Google, but follow these items and you'll do great. Good luck. Thanks so much.